Good afternoon. I propose that we basically move on and continue. It was a long day, but I think also in light of the discussion just in the panel before, the panelists are quite eager to put forward their projects, because I feel like they are very much resonating with what has been discussed in the previous panel and also in the other panels. And actually also with the work of Mark Farid, which is also maybe also a little bit challenging if you think about social effects and ethics. This panel is about embracing social and ethical challenges. We're going to talk with several artists and organizers that have executed various projects, really directing, intervening with people, citizens, other biological entities, in a very direct way. So always, there are always social and ethical aspects to that. My name is Raoul Frese. I'm a physicist. I'm from the Vrije Universiteit Amsterdam. There I have a laboratory on photosynthesis and transdisciplinary research. And we try to create those researches with artists and scientists together as a hub, where also artists are actually employed as researchers in the university. So there I also see projects, let's call it a very bottom-up, starting in discussion and being brought into public domain. I don't think as with so much impact as we will talk about today, so it is going to be very interesting for me as well. With me on stage I have Anni, Garza and Sarauw, May Abdalla and Clarice Hilton, Alessia Gervasone and Antonio Catalano. I will introduce the speakers a little bit more elaborate when we are going to their presentations. And I think we just move on to the first presentation of Anni Garza and Sarauw. Anni Garza lives in Mexico City as a lecturer at Mexico's National Arts Center, and she focuses on the intersection of identity, digital culture, and human rights. And she is affiliated to Ghost Agency, which is a program focused on women's and human rights in a digital age. Sarauw is from Denmark. She's an architect and organizer, also dedicated to digital humanities, and she is a co-founder of Ghost Agency. And they present their project, Ghost Agency, Women's Rights in the Digital Age. It's a research program analyzing cybersecurity for women, using art as a central hub to connect communities, experts, and safety specialists. Please.
Can we get, yeah. And is this thing working? Quite yet. Let me know. Is it working now?
No.
No? Okay, now. Yes. Is it, can you hear
No.
me? Yeah,
In the room,
okay,
they hear
great.
you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yes, and I think it's also important to say that both Annie and I, we are artists as well, and have training and practice as artists together, and yes, So, thank you so much for the introduction, and thank you so much for selecting us to the STARTS program and organizers. We are very happy to be here and have this chance to share some of our knowledge. So, Ghost Agency is a research or an artistic research practice exploring the transformative potentials of non-visible bodies and systems as basis for social change. We analyze cybersecurity for women and civilians as an advocacy for women's and human rights in the digital age. We use artistic practice approaches to channel knowledge between local and vulnerable communities on vital topics such as safety, community organization, and social technological developments. Our research and outcomes deploys multiple methodologies, enabling us to work on these overlapping and to us vastly underexplored research topics. Oh, it's not working. Okay. I could hear myself. Okay. So is that? Oh, that's better. Okay. Thanks. In the age of surveillance capitalism, we have no rights to privacy. There is nowhere obvious we can avoid our lives being converted into data that generates profit for corporations and enables governments to monitor and control citizens. In surveillance capitalism, digital technologies create information asymmetries that exclude many from equal participation, which undermines social movements and raise critical questions about our rights to privacy and data agency. In Mexico, women, queer, transgender people are exposed to gender-based violence, organized crime, and government corruption, all reinforced by a rather patriarchal society embedded in a digital infrastructure under a government that circumvents laws on the surveillance of its citizens. This creates a techno-social system that is difficult to avoid and still be secure, dangerous to resist, and almost impossible to escape. In the lives of Mexican women, the right to be themselves is an urgent ethical, humanitarian matter. The individual's rights to security and safety is eliminated, which challenges not only civilian technology, but also our access and literacy in cybersecurity, and our literacy and as such, our literacy concerning safety and rights on a much deeper level. So based on these gaps in knowledge, this research approach, which includes studying, for us in our project, includes studying cybersecurity models, and in our early research also entailed studying humanitarian aspects of dark web systems. We started our project in asking these questions. Where can we go when our daily lives are violently constrained? Our online existence extracts all of our information and no safe or private space is left. How might we relocate our physical bodies when our public as well as private spaces and democratic rights are compromised? How might we, in this fiercely transitioning digital age, practice a strategic exploration of emergent mechanisms of technology, online organization, and peer-to-peer methodology to remodel women's and human rights? Our research centers on critical gaps, both in terms of rights and ethics, including feminist perspectives in digital technologies and humanities. In developing adaptable methodologies, we are exploring the ethical responsibilities towards women's individuality, their communities, and also any collaborator involved in this project. Working with literacy and using digital tools involves in our project also a lot of analog strategies, such as continuous adaptability to the ever-changing conditions of technological accelerations. In this process, we cultivate a network of knowledge and action, connecting institutions, organizations, and individuals as collaborators on this ongoing outcome. A very central element in this research facilitates collaborative sessions with women in local communities across Mexico.
So these sessions that we have with women are a means of research and in their very own right a response to the local systemic challenges in relation to safety in the collapse of a non- and offline life. The sessions are core to research. They are central to how we can actually develop and test our technological designs and design them both adaptively and adequately for women and civilians to be able to reclaim agency and sanctuary in each sanctuary might mean. that's something we are exploring as well. The participants, or our local collaborators, are women of all ages and with diverse identities and backgrounds. Mothers who turned into activists and fight for justice of their lost children, who are mostly daughters, women's and feminist collectives, rural and indigenous women rights and environmentalists who advocate and fight for both the right to their land and body, BIPOC and LGBT plus activists, women's rights spokespeople and organizers, small NGOs, larger umbrella organizations across Mexico. It's the other one. This diagram, for instance, it projects a future for our practice, Ghost Agency, as a non-profit combining artistic research with collective humanitarian tech development. And to touch upon where we are right now, we are creating tools in close collaboration with cybersecurity experts who explore concepts such as multiple identities and community as a foundation for safety. We enable anonymized individuals to collaborate, and through this process, they co-author their own agency. The materials produced during these gatherings are co-designed, and all of the concrete outcomes, such as manuals and technological tools, are shareable and made available specifically for the use and replication within their local networks. To encourage shared literacy with their communities, the collaborative process becomes central in allowing participants to spread the knowledge production with the purpose of empowering others. Our theoretical research explores a grammar of invisibility, to pay reference to Denise Ferreira da Silva, Black feminist thought, where we are arguing that social and feminist aspects related to non-visibility and cybersecurity technologies for the benefit of women and civilians are rarely addressed. So we are also creating artworks with this knowledge, but in certain types of context. This is an exhibition in Mexico City last year. This is one of the installations, and through our artworks, we are exploring, for instance, the possibilities of embodying this ghost or people missing or lost bodies through artificial representations, such as this installation, Cecilia, where the audience can chat with a characterized bot who is a young woman. In this exhibition, we work thematically with the systemic lack of protection for Mexican women. The exhibition showed 2 video installations and 1 generative, Cecilia, each exploring questions of agency and the concept of blindness, not only as an inability to see, but as a way to observe unseen bodies and systems as a spaces for change. With that, the works also examined how the booming, unregulated tech sector impacts women's identifiability and normalizes gender-based violence, often exploring migrants, laborers as ghost workers, as noted by Hito Steyer in her text, Mean Images. In parts of the video works, we used AI and to anonymize characters appearing in the found footage, creating a ghost-like appearance of the woman. In visualizing the biases operating against the appearances of the bodies of Mexican women, the mediation underscored pertinent ethical issues in image politics and machine learning. We do not make art about our collaborators, and they are not exposed. Their identities and situations are never included in the artworks, but about the knowledge gaps and asymmetries of information that we research with multiple methods. This becomes part of an ethical protocol that our research requires, but one that was not necessarily established for transdisciplinary transnational artists from the get-to-go. Speaking of ethics in our practice, there are still many things to learn, and our ethical responsibilities differ in relation to diverse collaborators and partners. There is a question of hierarchy in terms of where the emphasis lies, Whom then receives the most ethical attention, and how are we delivering on that? What is our capacity to ensure that we are ethical? Which shared interests and goals are being established between the community, women and NGOs, and us as ghost agency? How have these been defined, or how should they be defined eventually and formalized, including considering risks and limitations on our side? So at last, this is part of the technologies we are developing, which you could, if you're interested, later ask.
Yeah, sorry, we didn't, I mean, we are developing concrete technological cybersecurity tools that are being implemented on an ongoing basis through our project. So come and ask questions if you want to know more about that. We didn't focus on that in this. We should say that we are part of a multi-year artistic research residency at a Danish institution called Art Hub Copenhagen, and that we are now starting to work with youth in San Diego as a new sort of extension of our project in the beginning of the new year. So we are kind of like Europe, Mexico, and the US right now. Okay, so thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, maybe a quick question, because I think my mic is working. I hope. Well, else you can just hear my voice, I guess. Because I was wondering, in this type of social engagement projects, do you also have like when you start, do you also know how you will finalize it? Because the question, I can imagine that it's it's a bit fuzzy where you will end, and because you have quite a responsibility for all the stakeholders with whom you work. So do you define that in the beginning already? And can you, in a nutshell, say what it is?
Yeah. I mean, we're dependent on like funding, and we are the applicants. So due to that, we have to define what the outcome is. But fortunately for us, we have been funded by programs that are very interested in process-based practice. And so it's kind of, we have been permitted to actually have a quite explorative practice in which we've actually also been offered a chance to define how this practice should work. That said, in terms of our technologies, we have like developed way more than we said we would. And that causes some confusion to our stakeholders because they are not able to follow all the parts in our project because of institutional, like there's often kind of lack on the institutional side to actually have enough time to follow all the steps in our work. So there's like an interesting sort of like factor relating to communication and deliverables. And as you see now, we have 8 minutes today. I think, I'm sorry, we are over time, 10 minutes and 30 seconds or something. But like today we did not have the time to actually elaborate on the technologies themselves, even though they're quite central as an outcome. Right. They're very, very central. But they're also cybersecurity, so you can't reveal all the details, then they wouldn't be secure.
Well, I should add something to that, just like in terms of social engagement, the project or the models are thought in a way that eventually they would not depend on us for doing this. But if we are teaching people how to reflect on or understand technologies and even produce them, the idea is that eventually it does not depend on two people or the team that we are, but that they can copy and make their own models through awareness of how to skip this very hard surveillance on activists, journalists that happens in Mexico.
Thank you very much. Very, very impressive work and super important. Yeah, we go to the next presentation. May Abdalla and Clarice Hilton, also artists here on stage. They also work together. Their project that they're going to present is work together with Lucy Watkins. I'm not sure, is she in the audience? No. Okay. May Abdalla, director and artist, co-founded a UK-based studio, Anagram. It's dedicated to immersive technology, like virtual reality in non-fiction storytelling. And Clarice Hilton specializes in disability-centered design, also at Anagram, and you are completing a PhD. She's a creative technologist and collaborates with filmmakers, dance practitioners, theater makers, and other artists for participatory practices. I do like to introduce Lucy Watkins because it's a very special collaboration. She works at the British University of the West of England. She's responsible for strategic oversight of a cluster of health programs, and she introduced virtual and immersive reality into simulation for health professionals over the last few years. You will present your project. This is not a simulation. It's a virtual reality documentary designed to inspire empathy towards people diagnosed with schizophrenia. I'd like to mention that it was the winner of the Grand Jury Prize at the Venice International Film Festival. And I also like to quote a user of this VR program who has schizophrenia, and they said, "It's like you took the game right out of my mind." He urged others with mental illness to use it as a way to rediscover themselves. Very curious about your project.
Okay, hello, my name's May. And so just, a little bit of background. So I started off in my life as a journalist. I then moved into documentary, film and TV production. And for me, creating Anagram, the artistic studio, which is, well, I might just say a few more things before I show you pictures. Well, there's some pictures. Was very much about a kind of a question around having spent a decade making images that people looked at, was how could we do embodied storytelling? How could technology be useful somehow to make experiences not necessarily immersive in the way that we might use it at the moment, to say that there's loads and loads of screens around us, but immersive in a sense that some other part of the narrative is around us, that we are also central to the story and not just observing someone else. So that was kind of the central question of Anagram, which started 11 years ago. We're still asking the same question. Sometimes we're like, yes, it works. Sometimes it doesn't. But in a way, it started off thinking very much about tactility and first-person storytelling, and VR kind of showed up and was kind of seductive in many ways because it's very fast to kind of iterate and play with. But in many other ways, it's kind of has its own issues, which we'll kind of touch on. So, so this project, it's started well. So, the project, which we go forwards or backwards, Goliath, which we made in 2021, but we started working on in 2018, was effectively like a decision in the studio that we'd make one last virtual reality experience and then never try and do it again. And we had this conversation around, if you're going to use this form for storytelling, what would be the most kind of meaningful use of this particular technology? So where's the kind of interactivity well connected? And the actual kind of narrative of Goliath is a first-person story by a man called John, whose online username is Goliath. And he had been in a psychiatric hospital for 7 years and had recently started a Twitch channel. And his brother, who was a friend of Barry, who's the co-director, had been talking to us about how when he heard his brother streaming on Twitch, he heard the voice of the boy that he knew from before he got his diagnosis. And there was something kind of both uplifting around that and this interesting kind of taking the idea of virtual reality and putting people into virtual reality and using it as a metaphor, as we kind of been talking, kind of to glean something around what is that experience. And secondly to that, and I know, Clarice, you'll go into this a bit more, the question of like, why should we do it? And, with our initial conversations that we had with, researchers in the field, kind of the immediate kind of statistic which I came across around life expectancy of people with schizophrenia was that people who have a diagnosis of schizophrenia have a 20-year shortened lifespan, and although it is a condition, the lifespan is that issue is really around social isolation. And of course, when it comes to how film has represented this particular condition, it's very much a trope of kind of fear and violence and anger, and actually when you delve into it, there's a lot more kind of victimization of people with schizophrenia experiencing violence and vice versa. So I'm going to play the trailer really quickly, which is this way, just to give you a little taste.
Can you tell the difference between what is and isn't real? When the one thing that links you to the outside world disappears, where does that leave you?
Schizophrenia is not a proven illness. It's something that I understand. You can't tell what's real and what isn't real.
It's wrong. Having unusual thoughts, having your thoughts colored. I never recognized the difference between myself and people with respect.
Everything you see is just part of the game.
A distortion.
Everything you feel
Now I found the crazy
is real.
So when it comes to ethics, in a little bit the kind of way that Chris was talking earlier today, every kind of industry has its own paradigm about how we approach ethics. And so effectively, from my starting point as a documentary filmmaker and a journalist, there's a degree to which there are questions that I would feel accountable to asking in terms of what's the best practice, in terms of telling a story of effectively a vulnerable person who is also part of a stigmatized community. So there were just a few things that we implemented even before we went into production. One was me and Clarice spent quite a long time trying to put together focus groups and workshops for the wider community of people with who experience of psychosis. So that might have been people with a diagnosis of bipolar disorder or schizophrenia, and invited them to quite a fun workshop where they could use VR to recreate kind of incidents of their psychotic episodes, which is fun but not fun. Sorry, maybe fun was the wrong word. And that was where we kind of started trying to get a little bit of this wider context around if there was a use for this project beyond kind of, where could it make the most impact? And this was where everybody that we spoke to around who they feel was the most important audience for this kind of work, and they came and they told us that they thought their doctor should see what it really feels like to experience psychosis. So that was initially part of the process. It then launched in 2021 in Venice, and as you mentioned, there was just like online, like a huge number of kind of it was very surprising. VR is niche, documentaries are niche, mental health is niche. It subsequently has been downloaded a million times, and that is kind of, in the world of art, that's kind of just mind-blowing. And then, but it also got a lot of engagement in terms of people talking about how visceral that experience was, and then particularly something which kind of allowed us to start, in earnest thinking about how could we bring this to the community that we've already established would probably have the most impact. And so this is a quote from Dr. James Harrison, a consultant at the A&E, and medical director of quality improvement and patient outcomes at North Middlesex Hospital in London, who said, "Through doing this experience, I can see that I have very fixed ideas about mental illness. This is going to make me reappraise those assumptions and help me to relate to patients going through this." And this was part of a much longer interview that was, in a way really kind of, kind of made us believe that although we'd kind of set out trying to make a piece of what is effectively a film and entertainment, that they could have this And with 38 seconds to go, Clarice, with the real meat of the presentation.
Yeah, I'll try. I'll see.
No, it's okay. They
how
went
far
3
I
minutes
get.
over.
In 3 minutes. So yeah, as has come up a few times today, and as May said, we really wanted to think about how can we use this amazing experience that's been created to make the most change, and where can it have the most impact. And as many people in this room will know, there's a global mental health crisis. And we wanted to see how could this piece of work be used in that context. Here, yeah, and VR has been used in lots of ways in the context of therapeutic mental health, but it hasn't been really used in training or showing the people who are working with people with diagnosis of mental health what their experiences are like. So we wanted to turn Goliath into a training tool and look at how we might develop it in this way with mental health professionals. And that's where Lucy has been an incredible support. I'm getting really confused about what's in there and what's in there. Sorry. So compassion and empathy are an incredibly important part of being a good mental health professional, or someone, a nurse, a doctor, a clinician, and it benefits patients and the people working with patients to be able to have time and the capacity to have empathy and compassion. And as has been mentioned today, art and storytelling can have a really beneficial part in creating what in the processes and in our context, doing helping with compassion and empathy for clinicians. So we wanted to look at how we could create something around the experience that enabled to take just from an art piece into something that could be used in a training tool in the context of the NHS and beyond. So what we have developed around the training tool is, so there's the VR experience, which May explained, and then around that we have tried to embed reflexivity, time to reflect on the experience, and have peer-to-peer to support so that people can discuss what the experience is like and what has come up for them. One of the key aims is we want people to be able to emotionally engage with the story, to get a deeper reflection on what it means for their practice, to increase empathy and compassion, and also to give them a better sense of their self-efficacy so that they're able to feel confident in their interactions with patients. And a big part of this in the, oh God, I'm doing it. There's
No,
not that
sorry.
much time.
I ruined it for
I'm
you.
trying to get through it really quickly, but just to
It's
touch on
Barcelona.
some of
It's
the
very different. It's not England.
Yeah, in London, I'd never be able to do this. So what were some of the ethical considerations that came up in this were that people could have a negative reaction to the experience, so they might watch it and think, oh God, I really didn't deal with a situation that well that I have been in with someone with psychosis, or that it relates to something else, so it could be triggering or bring up a traumatic experience. Also, in a space where you're getting people to share their experiences with their peers, they might feel in that situation able to share something and then later feel that they shared too much, particularly because it's often either with their colleagues or with their peers if it's in a student context. So in doing these training sessions, we've just been trying to create a boundaried space that people also feel comfortable in sharing their experiences. And maybe if people are interested, we can talk a bit more about that later. So in the impact of the work we've been doing, so Lucy has been running the experience with her students at UE, and it's been shown to over 1,000 students. And it's had really incredible impact so far. I can't read it on either one.
Do you want me to read it out loud?
Yeah, that would be great.
You want me to read the quote?
Yes, please.
I think about the experience a lot. The VR was very moving and has made me commit to thinking of patients as people with lives like my own who are struggling in a way I can relate to.
Thank you. And we're about to commence a more in-depth study in November, which is taking a more kind of rigorous research approach, which if you're interested, we can also have some questions on that later. I don't know if we have time for this.
Oh yeah, and so and we've just completed and launched the next I don't know really what the context is, but the next experience was a mixed reality experience about ADHD, which premiered in Venice 2 months ago, and might be in a well-known music art festival in Spain in June.
Which has no name, or that we are
Which
not allowed
I
yet?
shouldn't say.
Oh, you shouldn't say. Thank you very much.
There.
I will not ask a question. I think the impact was very clear in both presentations. Actually, you don't need a rubric for this type of impact, I guess. We will maybe discuss later on where does art, when are you still an artist? When are you becoming a social activist or social helper or medical? Yeah, probably. But we will see if we come to that. I want to move to the next presentation of Alessia Gervasone. She's a PhD researcher and curator here at the Department of Art History at the University of Barcelona. And the research group she researches in is called Art, Globalization and Interculturality. Besides that, she's also a project manager and curator at the S+T+ARTS Institute of Art and Culture in Barcelona. She manages several European projects and coordinates artistic residencies, workshops, exhibitions and performances. Her work investigates how artistic and curatorial practices can promote post-extractivist and decolonial imaginaries, integrating non-human governance. And this you will explain all in 10 minutes. Please.
And actually, it's not working the screen.
Your clicker?
I don't know what.
Oh, the screen is not working.
Yeah. Ah,
Oh.
okay. Yeah. Thank you so much. Okay, so yes, thank you, Raoul, and thank you, everyone, for organizing this beautiful and such interesting and necessary event. So this research aims to explore through case studies how our practice in collaboration with science and technology can address from, let me check, so what I have to just, is a PDF? Oh, I can pass. Ah, okay, now yes. Okay, so, sorry. This research aims to explore through case studies how our practice in collaboration with science and technology can address social and environmental issues from a decolonial perspective. By exploring territories subject to extractive practice, it aims to bring a modest contribution to an increasing, stimulating, and growing branch of research in order to stimulate the conception and the imagination of new possible decolonial and post-extractivist future. The background of my research in general and also of this presentation is the extractivist model. As we know, extractivism is a dominant capitalistic paradigm and involved the large scales of extraction of natural material in order to export them, with a huge consequences both on the land and on the people living this land. But in order to understand and to get a complete picture of the ontological meaning of the extractive model, we have to extend our research, our point of view behind the natural environment and involve also the cultural and social sphere. In fact, the conceptual meaning of extraction not only indicates extraction of natural material, but also became extraction when capital is nourished by the human cooperative practice, like a common good or like immaterial culture, history, for example, the history, the tradition, and the dignity of this culture. So as we know, starting from this background, there is this kind of richer gap, and I would like just with this presentation to try to reply to two research questions that are: how can artistic practice promote a post-extractive way of living, and what role could artistic and scientific research play in imagining and creating possibility for non-extractive lifestyle? In fact, current discussion in art, political ecology, and transdisciplinary collaboration emphasize the need to imagine a more sustainable future. But what kind of future and how this future can be implemented? Many artists and researchers, in fact, are developing research proposals that we can consider radical because they are able of generating or imagining alternative ways of structuring life and the relationship between human and non-human rights. For this presentation, I decided, of course, for time, because of time, to bring just two case studies, and I want just to open a parenthesis to thank you the artists that give me their paper, material, their time to go deep in their research also. So the first artist that I will speak about is Soliman Lopez with the artwork Capside. That actually this artwork is presented this artwork in the United Nations Conference COP16 that is now in Bogota. The topic is about biodiversity preservation. To develop this project, he did like an art residency in Casilla La Naira, that is a community in the Amazon, in the Colombian Amazon, and where 19 families from 11 different ethnic groups were forced to displace there because of agro-extractivism. And so they came together there in this place in order to try to preserve their culture and their indigenous lifestyle. Soliman, thanks to co-participatory process with the local community and with the university in the area, create a space where the rich biodiversity and the cultural heritage of this place, of this ecosystem, can be experienced in a completely new way. In fact, with a participatory, let's say, process, they collected DNA sample from 4 different considered sacred trees. One of these trees is the Syringa, that is actually the tree involved in the creation of monoculture of rubber. And that caused also the death of more than 30,000 indigenous people in the area. So they collected this DNA sample, and then they analyzing it, and then they decided to encapsulate it in a rubber sphere and to create a kind of open air installation in the Amazon with the community. He speaks about environmental DNA, but I would like to propose ecosystemic DNA, because from my point of view, this artwork is considered our broader ethical responsibility, not only toward the natural environment, but also toward all the organisms that are belong in this ecosystem. So it considers also the social part. Following, for example, the idea of pluriverse of Arturo Escobar or the archipelagic vision of Edouard Glissant. In fact, this project, I can say that it not represent only a fight for the preservation of this land, but is also a fight for the preservation of the many words that are belonging in this land. There is also another part interesting that is a museum. They are building a museum, museum that is a participatory and decolonial museum that aim to create a new local economy based on local indigenous cosmology culture. Why participatory? Because it's built by the community and for the community, and the colonial because it's in the management process, not based on Western, like in the hierarchical Western normal procedure of in the management, for example, of institution or museum. But he's like a community center with a community center management that is proper of the indigenous community. And yeah, and also he's aiming to create a different kind of economy, because most of the people involved in this area were I skipped that. So they were working for the big industry, and they were like literally burning a piece of land in order to create a monoculture. And so this can be also a new kind of economy for them. Yeah, then so we saw like some point that like resume, let's say, of concept, the valorization of modern human rights, the extractivism, new decolonial the introduction of new decolonial epistemology, so not only from Western point of view, but also from other knowledge system that in this case are indigenous, and the valorization of heterogeneity instead of a universal point and unique point of view. The second case study, I will go more faster because of time, of course, and is Tabita Rezaire. Now she is presenting this artwork in this installation. Actually, is an experiential installation that in Thyssen-Bornemisza Museum in Madrid, and she's an Afro-cyber feminist, and working practically in all her work, artwork project, she spoke about decolonialism, and she tried to interact the new media with the colonialist topic. This artwork, the name is Omi Yemoja Temple, is an experiential space that blends scientific research with spiritual ritual, drawing on indigenous cosmology and technology, in order to underline the relationship between aquatic microorganism and the human life. It creates a kind of experiential space that invites the participant to engage with other knowledge systems, encouraging the reflection of alternative ways of structuring life and society for the future. This project is also it started from a residency in Tanzania between Tabita and scientists from Max Planck Institute. They were studying the behavior of fish and the biomimicry of the color that after they use it to create the textile element of the installation that are also blended in indigo blue color that is typical of the Nigerian culture. And this experiential space is characterized also by a sound art installation that is made from this aquatic sound data that they took with the scientists, and also are characterized by these 3 altars that where the visitors were invited to making an offer for release, like a kind of a release element within their life or within the community and within the world at large. To conclude, some of the main point in this case are modern human rights, the creation of new decolonial epistemology, in this case also indigenous one, the valorization of collective intelligence, so instead of human-centered point of view and anthropocentric point of view, but a relational intelligence. The valorization of heterogeneity, that is the basis, because before everything we have, before of the subject, there are the relation that are creating the different subjects. So first of all, we have to change the link of the relation that are between the different objects of subject in order to change the process. And and this is a social and is an experiential space that is creating a social and shared imaginary, or make visible the invisible, in this case the microorganism and the relation that are connecting different parts. So to resume, to conclude, we can see that art, science, and technology can promote transdisciplinary dialogue in the eco-social transition by stimulating interaction between human and non-human community through the colonial approaches to imagine post-capitalistic future and ethical governance. We can see that this transdisciplinary collaboration can enable the creation of sensory experience that can lead to the emergence of new epistemology and different kind of biopolitics. They can work together to shape a social imaginary and introduce a new narrative that represent a form of knowledge that are able to respect life. Such imaginary can offer opportunity to examine collective values and explore possible alternatives. They can, this transdisciplinary collaboration can activate political imagination and can promote relational vision and politics of care. Care for the territory, care for the land, care for the ecosystem, and care as a right. Thank you so much.
Thank you. In view of time, I will also not ask you a question at this point, but we can ask questions after the last speaker. Antonio Catalano, you are going to discuss your project to create more empathy towards plants, I guess. You're an artist based in Italy, but he's also a chemist. So me as a physicist feel right at home again on this stage. You're also a performer and a creator of visual works, poems, short stories, and theater. He's a cultural designer working on public art and relational art projects. And as a researcher, his current focus is an art science project on plants and human-plant communication. And you are going to present, indeed, PLART, research practices on wilderness, or not? No, social and ethical challenges in PLART.
Shorter one.
Quick change of title. Yeah, a project, but you described it also as a multisensorial art science theater piece, which I found quite intriguing, about plant communication, including videos and the use of real VOCs, volatile organic compounds.
Yeah.
Right? These are the chemicals that plants can release to communicate with among themselves and with others within their ecosystem. Please.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, of course, for the invitation, for the opportunity to be here, and it's already been very, very rich to discuss between us, preparing this panel. And so let's see, where should I do that? Okay, so introduction to the introduction. I mean, why I'm here talking about plant communication in this slot where we are talking about social issues, very important, like women issues or health issues or post-extractivist and post-colonialist. Because when I speak about plant communication, usually maybe not in this room, but people think about fairy tales or about hugging trees. And actually, think about this tree that cannot escape from you, that you are coming and hugging him, and he is actually feeling that. Maybe you are also wearing this nice fragrance that you love so much, but it is full of chemicals that the trees use, that the tree can sense, and it's the way to sense the world. So ask permission before hug a tree or at least think about that. So that's why I'm thinking about this. Doing this project. It's this art and science project about plants, because if on this slot, because I think that we really it's probably the only way to change our relationship with the environment is to empathize in some way. We will always say that it's not true that we are destroying everything, that everything will be normal. There will be everybody, there will be always somebody saying that, negate that, because we love our welfare and we don't want to change usually. So I'm a scientist and an artist, so I work as a chemist in an industry, but I am also a performer and theater actor, and so that's why I have two names, because Antonio Catalano is the one on the left. Antonio Irre is the one, so I confuse in my life quite a lot about that, but it's part of the game. I also work on social practices, so I bring people to the forest, and not really to hug, but to stay there, and there I do my theater and science together in this mixture. I also do some visual arts and blah, blah, blah. So since many years, I'm trying to study the human being, who we are. So that's why I studied pharmaceutical chemistry, where chemistry and biology were put together. Then I studied bioethics. And then I ended up at UPF, studying master in cognitive system and interactive media, try still to put together the things. And here's where, so I'm very happy to be back in Barcelona after so many years. And it's there where I realized that I was studying ourselves, how we are built by a bunch of cells. And actually, plants, like we have one here, did you recognize two? Did you saw them? I don't know. But I realized that they are also bunches of cells. Basically, we have the same basic of life. And also that's technically possible to have some kind of exchange and communication, because we are very, very similar. Some 100 years, millions of years ago, we took different paths of evolution, but basically we are very, very similar. And so starting from this, I started writing and asking also myself what I would ask to a plant, if I can ask something. And starting from them, I started creating one first installation that I put in some different places of the city, asking people to put answers, to put questions to the trees. The idea was to read them and start thinking. But then that got so personal between the person and the tree that I stopped reading. And but it was I was starting this, and then I put together all those ideas in my first theater show. It's open air traveling shows, where I put together my thought about life, about cells, and also together with the metamorphosis of plants by Goethe, by Palomar, by Italo Calvino, that is a writer that was a lot in, influenced by the science that was surrounding him. And going on, then I had the possibility to go to have a residency in Sweden, in a lab studying plant communication and volatiles. And from there, a new theater show was born, and I had the opportunity to present that in Venice Biennale a couple of years ago. And what else? Yeah, so why I'm trying to do that? Yes, for me, it's a research path. So I'm able both to understand what the scientists are doing in their labs, but I also have some artistic trainings. So one thing we were discussing before with Raoul, that I really think that if you, and we can discuss later maybe with some tapas if you wish, that to work on art and science to really have to have a little bit a foot in both fields. Otherwise, you will very difficultly, you will have big difficulty to understand what's the process of thinking of a scientist or of an artist. Maybe these facilitators or mediators we were talking before would be interesting, but I never worked with one. I'm very curious about. And so getting back to the social, yeah, that as I started, if you just start thinking that you can somehow communicate with this plant or with all the plants around, well, first of all, you see it. And then you change your point of view. And this is fundamental to change our approach with all the rest of the world. Then these are some concepts that I work on. So the concept of complex adaptive systems. So these bunches of cells that, oops, create something bigger that is us or plants. Or you can talk about intelligence. There's a lot of discussion if plants are intelligent or not. Then you say, okay, we got this intelligence. Now, to be intelligent, you also have to do this and this. And we are trying to understand what intelligence is and communication. Also, I'm asking myself a lot of questions about communication. If also, what's language? If it's really voluntary, why we speak. And sometimes I stop and look at people and say, why are they speaking? It's very, I think it's very a broad field of investigation. And so, of course, the anthropocentrism is very challenged. And our relationship with what we call the environment, maybe doing this research, I'm more and more convinced that we are not so separate from the rest. Of course, there's also other things like animal ethics or I mean plant ethics. For example, Paul before was talking about these little bugs that he was like killing and was feeling a little bit bad. Also with plants, when we do studies with plants, maybe we should do the same that we do with animal ethics. Well, there are a lot of a cloud of different things that you can get deeper into that. Wow, I'm almost over time. I don't want to go on that. So that's my research now going on. I'm an independent researcher, so I'm not part of any institutions. I'm based in Italy, in Padova, and I'm here because I need a family, like you, I mean, because sometimes you feel lonely doing this research, but then I ended up in places like this where you can see that that it maybe makes sense to to do this, and so I'm open to any other discussion or opportunity to cooperate with you all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Also to be so sharp on time. You have been very patient waiting till the end, so I really want to give the floor to the audience for questions. I'm pretty sure that you will have some on all these diverse topics, but maybe let me kick off. I think if I listen again to all your stories, that maybe you are already disciplinarists. So you do not need necessarily these collaborations of different expertise, but you seem to incorporate the expertises all combined, and that is quite nice to see, I would say. In that sense, would you still call yourself an artist? I was curious about this. And is there something that you like about being called an artist, or maybe that you have more this freedom, that you are not this confined to protocols? But on the other hand, I can imagine that since you are working with, with vulnerable groups and vulnerable people, with audiences, you do need these protocols. So I was a bit curious if you could. Anybody wants to elaborate? Well.
No.
Let's test it.
No, okay. Is
Yes,
this on? Okay,
this seems
sorry.
to be
Okay, I think there's the question of like being an artist. If you know, it's probably a bit of a myth that you have extensive freedom working as an artist, but it's for some. It was to me at some point after graduating as an architect, working a bit as an architect. I found out that architecture was maybe a little bit too confining for my mindset, and the arts, the label of the artist was the most suitable in a sense. So I also took an education in the arts because I'm a privileged Danish person that has free education, and then I worked on the side and I could actually afford to take another master's in the arts at Goldsmiths University in London. And why did I do that? I mean, that's basically, it was a more open spectra and much more creative and like-minded people were there. That was very soothing and comforting. But I think that there, at the end of the day, to be able to do what Annie and I have been doing now, starting 3 years ago, it requires a lot of discipline and you know, not only the imagination that might come from having decided to being willing to take on the label of the artist, but beyond that, it's a lot of work, and it's a lot of work that nobody defines for you. So you have to do the work of defining it, and it's definition. It's all the language that you all here have also presented today. It's through your abilities that you have trained quite a lot, I believe, and I'm impressed by it, and I honor that. But like, it's discipline, and like we're as thinkers disciplinary in that, but it's also a tool for us to be able to articulate these sometimes quite complex ideas that we have, or ideas that are able to enter into complex problems that then become possibly solutional. So I think it's let me stop for now, but yeah, so I think it's like, yeah, it's a paradox maybe.
Well, but in our particular practice, it also means some safety from being flagged as something else that might be problematic in the particular context of Mexico, like flagging ourselves as feminists or activists or organizers. That's impossible. And the project wouldn't be possible if it wasn't, because it was framed as an artistic practice.
Right, you're seen like a little bit harmless as an artist. That's interesting.
We look harmless.
I think as has come up quite a lot today, it often depends on what funding is available, what I define myself as. I work as a researcher, as an artist, as a facilitator, and often all different roles within a day. And I think, it is often dependent on just being able to make a living from what you're doing as well, because it's very difficult as an artist.
I think, there's something, you mentioned, I think, the word kind of anarchic. I think I personally am trying to get a perspective away from an industry that already has its kind of value system. And because I thought, your little throwaway comment about, when do you stop becoming an artist and when are you a mental health practitioner? And I think, art has its own entrapments, right? So it's kind of like, are you an artist who wants to be chosen by your country to present at the Venice Biennale? There is a kind of cult and industry, but I think that for me, the idea that my practice might be as an artist whose location for my art might be in a hospital training room, right? Like there's a canon to the kinds of art that I feel connection with, but there are also the kind of art that I feel absolutely no connection with, and I don't share the value systems of those bits of art. So yes, you can seem harmed. I think that ever since I was 15, I used to go around the town that I lived in and lie to people and say I was doing a GCSE art project. I didn't actually study art, or ever do any formal studies, but it was always a very, you know, like, what are you doing here at this building site? Or why are you standing in the middle of the roundabout of the main spaghetti junction of the city? It's like, oh, it's an art project. And then people say, okay. You know, and so there's just something that we have allowed ourselves as a culture, even though there's always contesting about what is it, you know, what is it? Why is this art? This a child could do it. You know, the fact is we've allowed a little bit of space to say that it's defined by what, you know, what people do as opposed to how it should be done.
But I was also a little bit curious about the ethics of it. So because you, does it, or does that not, does not resonate with you that as an artist you may be less held accountable, you are less bound by protocols, like in the medical field to work with people. You have, of course, all these protocols with patients, and as an artist you may experience a little bit more freedom, or is that really not how
I
it
mean,
works
some
in reality?
doctors kill their patients.
That's it.
Like, I mean, there are rules, right? But like, how are rules actually? You know, we can sit here and we can say there should be rules and the right approach to, you know, trying to create your, you know, decolonize your own perspective. But, you know, who's actually, you know, who actually is there to stop people do things outside of protocol other than panelists?
Want to comment on this? Maybe let's first go to Alessia, or do you?
Yeah, I mean, for example, I was thinking now that from my point of view is really somehow, if we are speaking about transdisciplinarity, it's also super difficult to put a label. Like, what is an artist now, today, working with scientists, is a scientist, or is is an artist scientist, curator, there are curators that are also artists, but there are also researchers. So finally, I think that putting this kind of label is like also trying to put a border to, and to define something from our scientific perspective, maybe, that from my point of view and what I'm studying now is like if I want to build something different in the future, I don't want to maybe I have to deconstruct this idea of this border, no? And to valorize the heterogeneity, and we cannot speak about sharing relation if we are putting border of knowledge, something like this. Yeah.
So I know you want to say something, but let me first ask Antonio, because you are even split in names. Maybe it is time
I
to
have a
merge them
problem
back
with
again, I
labels.
think.
So of course you use what is most convenient at the moment, but of course.
Or is it also a funding effect that you can ask funding under two names?
No, it's more when you talk with people. I mean, our artist is a safe harbor, let's say. When you say, I know it's an artistic project, as you are saying, I'm an artist, okay, you are allowed to do strange things, weird things that are useless. And this is nice because, but still, it's not really the idea of artists that we would like to convey to the society, I think. So it's a double-faced coin.
You still have,
maybe, is it working now? Yeah, okay. Yay, at the very end. I think that, I mean, so in about 2 weeks, Annie and I, we have a all-day workshop, an ethics workshop at Art Hub Copenhagen, and where we have invited 2 professor respondents to respond to our project on the terms of its ethics, and of course also the ethical questions that it provokes. And that, I think, is speaking of a time that we are in, have been in a few years, where institutions, cultural institutions, let's like use like maybe them as a category on their own, because I mean they have been called out on many aspects with regards to policies that have been called out as to be possibly lacking behind in terms of certain things that, you know, has never really been grappled with in terms of having structures for how to work ethically in precisely, for example, projects such as ours, which is a transnational project between Mexico and Denmark, but also that also involves, for example, these local communities of women and what's going on like within that space. And we talked a little bit about it in our presentation, but like for the institution that takes on a project such as ours, they are also responsible. So within that all together, you know, and that's like also a transdisciplinarity, the discipline of ethics that is something within academia is another thing within the arts. But the arts wants to kind of, you know, learn through that, and they are also keen on learning through our project on it. So like that's why the questions about those responsibilities also exist in this panel, but also within our presentation. And so I think that was just, yeah, speaking of ethics, there was another probably thought that I had.
Can I just say one quick thing about it? I feel like, so who enforces the ethics? I don't mean enforce in a kind of like there is a tribunal for the artist, you know, but there aren't, like, as we talked about this kind of the first thing today, like, I already feel that, you know, as somebody who comes from a history of journalism, I'm speaking a slightly different language to different kinds of, say, performance art, you know, or, and so, you know, when I was working within journalism, I had a lot of ethical training, and then I kind of watched that all just disappear in the era of, you know, citizen media, which had its, so that we kind of are living outside of institutions in a way where things get created. There's obviously, you know, this is an academic setting, and so really institutions kind of is behind everything here. But beyond that, like in terms of practitioners, you really are not, you're really isolated from that kind of world. And so the only thing that kind of creates that continuity in terms of ethics is the culture around the individual of us kind of communicating how we do things and why we do things, and kind of there being a language where there are always panels, you know, about ethics in order to keep that conversation live and relevant, so that people who are making work understand what their responsibilities are, or question whether there is like the necessity to decolonize the perspective, or like think around different kinds of extractionism. So there's a bit of work which is just really around the cultural architecture that allows the people making work to have that ethics. But I mean, of course, you know, the way we do stuff at Anagram is it's very rigorous, as I'm sure artists who want to collaborate with scientists, you know, but and because we have to work with people within the NHS, you know, it's analysed within an inch of its life. But there's obviously a process whereby, you know, there's, if we only existed as a game on the Metastore, nobody would ever really analyze what it was that we were doing.
I mean, I have just a comment to that, because what I'm hearing you say is it might be wrong, but that in short, like, the ethics should be permitted to come afterwards in sort of like the reflexive process.
No. I don't mean that.
Like
I just meant
the
kind of jelly that the institutions and the industry, or whatever it is that kind of keeps us together as individuals, and this is one formation of a community, and there are other formations of community, is that in that gelatinous material between us, somebody has to pump in ethics. You know, so that those decisions, the microscopic decisions that you're making all the time, you know, is just doing within the context of awareness of what our responsibilities are towards other people. And, you know, so how does that happen? You know, what we're talking about is like 4 individuals who have thought about it. And how does that sharing, where's that sharing most relevant to take place?
Well, at least we are 2 of us, and we're working with a lot of different types of people, including institutions and victims of violence. So before approaching these groups, ethics have to be discussed at least between us. Otherwise, we might run into losing trust or re-victimizing people, which is super delicate. So I think we don't need an extra hand trying to push us to think about it. We are responsible for the people we are in contact with, and this is a personal stance on.
Which is why you're running a workshop about it in 2 weeks.
Yes,
because people want to learn from you. So that's.
I'm looking in
I'm
the
not
audience.
sure.
If anybody has a remark or question, please raise your hand. Everybody is
They're tired.
tired? You're not tired. We can discuss.
It was
more,
intense.
but, because I was also, if I may pose another question, then is that the reason for protocols and ethical committees, etc., is that so you say basically trust me, I'm an artist, so I'm trustworthy, I'm very I have integrity, and I make sure that it will be done correctly. On the other hand, as you are engaging with groups and you are, let's say, put into society, of course, it could be that trust is being built where other artists or other people actually take advantage of. I can imagine that it is in your project. It could be a bit of a tricky, because you say on one hand, I present myself as an artist so that it's a safeguard. On the other hand, you could also, no? Or do you not say that?
No. You have to use, we address it as a multiplicity of personalities, because you cannot go with the same flag that you go to the institution, to these people, because immediately they would say you are the institution, and then you want just to extract information, make your artworks, and leave us without anything for us. So
would you do your work, by the way, without artworks, without works?
Yeah.
Right.
We are doing it as, I mean, this is, I think, you know, there's like, instead of using the artist role or label or like as a way of introducing, then, or as the permitter in approaching these local women, it is, I think, it's actually what you're saying, Annie, I think is like the multiplicity of sort of agendas is like, within that there's also a personal sort of side, which is probably necessary in order to offer a trusted space. We believe that there are situations around your lives, in your everyday, in your local setting, that we might address with these concerns and with this way of beginning to imagine something together that, you know, could turn into something that we call agency or the sanctuary, but that it has to happen in a mutual way. And I think that in that, like, that on the institutional side, we call it research. And like in the arts institutional side, we call it artistic research. But it's not always used to bring back into an artwork. It's used in the artistic research in also, as mentioned before, like, we are fortunate at the moment to have some support that acknowledges that actually want to learn from the process part of our practice. And they don't care that much. They appreciate it, but they don't care that much that we're doing, you know, a great big final exhibition. But we are doing that. And so that's maybe why it works. But we are not bringing in the subjects, their narratives and their realities or their identities into the artistic output, but everything that happens between us and them in a closed, safe space is the most important thing that we learn. And that is like what basically also probably, and I'm sorry to say that, that's also like, because we do that, that's why we receive the funding. But it's also what informs these technologies that we are developing, that in the end we very much hope will be something that all of us would potentially, as civilians,
maybe to
learn something from.
Because I can also imagine that the artwork is also for you to have a outlet for your emotions and your experiences as you are creating the work. I
think we're learning from a reality that me, even as a Mexican, wouldn't know that it's happening, which is so shocking and heartbreaking in terms of the amount of violence and systems that are working against civilians, people. So I think the artworks are this way of putting together ideas and explanations of what is really going on in a country that tries to invisibilize these hardcore amount of violence, or especially gender violence. So I think it's not a catalyst for us, but it's part of the research. We're learning from a reality that it's invisible otherwise, and we're trying to portray that reality not with the same amount that things that are happening. For instance, I don't know, there are images out there about the corpses, and it's really violent in that way. But we are trying to construct a more an explanation of what is really going on that has not only this human side, but only explaining why it's happening, why is a country decided to go into necropolitics and how they are using technology to implement that. So that's basically the relationship within the work.
In also in short, like I think the artworks are a way for us to communicate what motivates the actual social technological work that we're doing, so that people can follow better. And it's like there are audiences in Mexico and in Southern California and in Denmark or in Europe, and like they have different, mindsets because they are in different geographies, more or less, and so we have to work around that. And then I think it's
the last thing we should talk
important,
about. But
important, like an artwork, like an outcome an outcome of our artistic practice, and it is, of course, a part of an economy of sustaining an artistic practice today in contemporary arts, visual arts. You have to have an output in your portfolio, and you have to be part of something within a certain sort of like present tense, because otherwise you are not seen and you won't get funded. So there's that sort of like part of it too, which is something sometimes not that personally like kind of like guided, right? But it's acknowledged that we're professionals, so of course we can participate in that.
Have a last look at the audience. I think, are we all satisfied? I am. You want to have, please have the last.
I was thinking actually you might have the last. Or maybe I'll just ask you a question, because in a way, we've heard a lot from artists, kind of, it's almost like communication strategies that kind of maybe the three of us, we're trying to communicate something using art. Whereas I think what you were presenting through your artists was kind of like just a shift in like an ontological reality that is presented through, not in a kind of overt way, perhaps, in kind of, I'm not saying it's more art, but as in, and in a way, your kind of presentation was about the value of some of this kind of more hidden, like the hidden moral issues that might be in like the kind of substructure of all of that. But I just feel she should say more things. Yeah, I know. What's the question? And everyone wants to
good
go
journalism.
Well, there's going to be a whole PhD thesis about this, I assume. At some point. I think we can end on this note. Thank you all very much for really great presentations, courageous work, and showing, maybe a new type of artist, a transdisciplinarist. That is my own take-home message.
Anti-disciplinary.
Thank you for your attention. Let's take the speakers one more time.
So thank you so much. I think it was a very beautiful discussion to bring for tomorrow. So we will start tomorrow with this STARTS dialogue. We will be discussing institutions, other forms of institutions, and how can we also hack what is already there. So a bit of information. So so we are closing here today. A bit of information of logistics. We will start tomorrow at 9:30. Please be here. And now, so you know that we have like two groups. One is going to go to the STARTS family meeting. Those that are going to the STARTS family meeting, please follow me. outside. There's a bus waiting for us there. And the other ones that are going to go to the design hub, the hub, please wait in the hall because we will leave also in more or less 10 minutes. We close here. Thank you so much and see you now.